Right, it's Wednesday, November 2nd. This is an end of the day SPY report, and you can see here today on the daily chart, we end up with a big red day to the downside. We had a 2-down day, and once we had that 2-down day, we reached our targets, which is essentially these 4 lows that were right next to each other. And now we have another weekly target down here, which I'll get into in a second. But it ended up being a big red day, and this was Fed day, announcement day, and there was a lot of volatility. And I'll kind of explain, how that all unfolded relative to what I discussed in the opening video. And I was kind of discussing how these 2 blue lines here, the pre-market range, it was a pretty significant kind of levels in terms of where the market may be heading next. And if we went above that green line here, there was a chance we can then start a whole new uptrend to turn the month green above the purple line. And if we went below this area, then that could also possibly start here on the weekly chart an entire, down move developing. And we'll see there's a couple of key things that have to happen to really confirm that we're going to come all the way down and broaden lower. I discussed how on the opening video, this one red bar was kind of a compounded outside bar. All these weeks, moved lower than that bar, then moved above that bar. So it's possible we could have just broadened out up here and started lower. So there's a couple of key areas right in here if we move a little lower to see if we, penetrate that, to see if we're really going to make new lows. But we'll get into that in a second. In terms of how the day developed, just and relative to some of those key levels, what you had here was the market did start lower right out of the gates below the pre-market lows and kind of had a downward bias here, for most of the morning session. And right before the Fed announcement, the market did start to head up a little bit, and you were wondering, that's a sign that they were anticipating, an up move of some kind. And right out of the gates, or, after the announcement, the market moved up very strongly. And at this point, this was the key thing. For a moment, it looked like maybe you're going to have, a whole reversal of direction, upward move, the whole bullish scenario I described in the pre-opening video, if we held above that line. And what I did was at that point, I was watching it really closely because I know the Fed, these announcements have a tendency to move one way to start and then another way afterwards, or it could have moved down to start and then up. A lot of times that happens if you've watched these Fed announcements. But anyway, when you're watching that and you want to see if this is going to be a real move that sticks up here, it took out some stops and it got kind of right to the halfway point of yesterday. So if it was just a normal kind of a day, you'd be kind of failing on the 2 down, moving above the midpoint of the prior day and projecting up to that purple line. But in this case, if you watched it real closely, and I was doing that, I was watching the 5-minute chart, you had that big move up. Then we kind of started failing in here, are we going to hold or not hold? So this was just a quick reaction kind of thing. You don't know what's happening. Came up then for just a brief moment, we tried to take out that high and it looked like we might get it. And then boom, it immediately failed, went below those lines. So if you're really watching it closely, and that's what I was doing, you saw that there was kind of failure up here and it wasn't really holding. But at that point, it just kind of held in here and held in here. And then when it really broke down, that's where I, it was clear to me that that was a rejection of that area and we were going to the downside. Posted another video where I bought some Meta puts and some Nvidia puts here, and they closed, they moved up nicely. Market closed much lower, should follow through lower. So what we have here, once we had this key rejection, and to me it was pretty clear as we made this big red bar down, taking out these lows again. At that point, the weekly chart had the 2-up failure that I discussed in the pre-opening video. We moved above the halfway point of the prior week. We were about there at the time. So we're kind of now looking for the end of the week to take out those lows. We're just about there. I mean, that's tomorrow. We should follow through lower and take out those weekly lows. And then at that point, what I see developing here, we have this little gap between the high of this bar and the low of that bar on the weekly chart that we could fill. And if we really either tomorrow or into next week head much lower on the monthly chart here, we almost get to a point where we're taking out the halfway point of the monthly bar, and that could be a whole rejection month. If not, then we're going to hold that area at this point, given that, what do we have, 2 days to go in the week? If we kind of we'll have to see. If we come down a little bit and then maybe Thursday and Friday have a big rally, this could be just a brief little pullback bar, a 3 bar to the downside that kind of holds, and maybe starts higher into next week. If we get a little bit of a a follow through lower, we're going to have to kind of need a 2 down and a 2 up week, to start that uptrend. So there's a bunch of things that have to happen as this week comes to an end to determine if we're going to possibly just hold in here and then start back up. The first thing that happens tomorrow, I mean, I don't know for sure what's going to happen. I assume we'll follow through lower. Is you're going to have to get above the midpoint of the, so maybe tomorrow we gap up 300 points. We start above the midpoint of this bar, and this was just one big fake move. We maybe take out the weekly low and then all of a sudden start up tomorrow. Anything's possible, but for now we're very close to possibly just rejecting this entire, move up and kind of broadening out, to the upside, and then maybe working all the way down again. And we have a lot of lower targets here, these yellow lines from way back, that once I saw the turn, happening to the downside, I thought might be in play. So we're going to really have to see how this week ends. We should take out it's projecting to the lows of that week to get an outside bar to downside. At that point, you want to see, do we get follow through into next week, or do we just kind of hold and maybe, then have to figure out what happens more in mid-November, either up or down, but we'll figure that out. But anyway, today, I'm not going to say it was the easiest day to trade, but it did create a great opportunity once you saw that failure and kind of knew that, we weren't getting above certain levels that had to hold for the upside. And it led to high probability for a continuation lower. And now we just have to see how much lower and how much, how strong, any move down might be from this point going forward.